There we go.
Hi, Tommy Boylan.
What's up, Mr. Neal? Good to see you.
Hey, Richard Genovesio and Richard Bendo. Well, I'll tell you, this was an interesting time because, let me put this down so I can see what the hell I'm doing. So I just had eye surgery. So you can see. Wow,
Beautiful.
very impressive.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't affect my voice.
Is it all right if we just start recording? Just go for it.
At
Okay.
your convenience.
Yeah, I mean, hello, Mr. Neal. Welcome to Just Talk Podcast. As you said, I'm Richard Bendo. That's Tommy Boylan. That's Janoviso. How are you this fine afternoon, sir?
I got a good attitude. I had my some eye surgery, and I'm recovering. So on balance, not bad, not bad.
Nice.
I don't.
What is the basic theme of Just Talk? How can I be of value to you?
Actually, you're already of value because you showed up. That's it.
Okay.
Nothing more, nothing less. It's
So
about
let me ask
just
you, who's your basic audience? Who would we be talking to?
pretty much probably guys that nerd out about stuff.
Okay. Well, then I'll tell you what. I'll nerd on on the newest company that I've started. Okay.
Gotcha. What do you got?
Please do.
So I'm going to do two things to your listeners. So first, I'll tell you a long story. We got time. Okay.
Yeah.
So I've been seeing the same psychiatrist analyst for 30 years. And after all this, we've sort of become friends. I'm not sure how much medical value. I'm never going to be totally sane. And last July, I come to him and I say, I've sold my last company. The last company was not successful. So I'm beat up. And my sentence is, well, I'm going to be a consultant. Oh, okay. He says, all right. And I said, but, consultant, I mean, I don't know, got to get customers. And he says, well, I have an idea for you. He says, he's a psychoanalyst, but he should have gotten an MBA. He's a business guy. So he says, I've started a chatbot. Oh, really? He said, I created a chatbot for lawyers who are in personal injury. So that when you call up and you say, I got hit by a truck, instead of having to answer the phone all the time, the chatbot says, oh, well, tell me, did you really get hit by how big a truck? So he thinks, and he gets this made by a technologist in Bangladesh. He finds a coder in Bangladesh, and he finds the coder on Fiverr. Okay. So he says to me, well, I send this to a bunch of lawyers in Los Angeles and nobody responds. I said, well, welcome to, the world of entrepreneurship. Nobody ever returns phone calls. And he assumes because it's such a good idea that of course they're going to respond. And he's disappointed that nobody does. He says, but you could take some of your material and create your own little chatbot. And with this chatbot, you could get customers. I said, okay. So I took 620 of our columns. My wife and I, mostly myself, but we've written 600 columns in the San Diego Union Tribune, which is the local newspaper. We've been writing on entrepreneurship since 2012. So I got this big stack of crap, and I got 4 books that I've written. So I call the guy up in Bangladesh. His name is Talha, and I say, Talha, I'd like to create a chatbot because I'm going to use it kind of like marketing so people will think how smart I am. He says, okay. I said, how do you charge? He said, I charge $300 and $15 an hour. I said, that's ridiculous. And I sent him $1,000 because it's crazy. But I began to see that, gee, there's a mismatch between developers in this town for 250 grand and a guy in Bangladesh. And it turns out he's brilliant. He has won there was a 400-person hackathon. He came in second.
Wow.
Okay, so he creates a chatbot for me and your audience. It's easy to do. It's called www.unicornhunter, one word, unicornhunter.ai. And if you go to unicornhunter.ai, I know Jan's going to do it right now, and you type in a question like, how do I get rid of my partner? Or what's the best way to find a startup? You will get my answer in my voice.
Nice.
Unicornhunter.ai. So I decide, I create this. It costs about $5,000 all in. And I assume that people will go there and they'll say, these answers are so clever that we're going to hire this guy to be a consultant. So, okay, kind of interesting. And it's pretty clever, unicornhunter.ai. You'll get some interesting answers. What's fascinating about AI is that the answers were never said in that configuration by me. So if you hear the answer, you'll say, but I never said those words. That is what AI does. That's pretty interesting. Okay, it's kind of fun and it's like a calling card, and that's the end of it, except 3 weeks later, a guy comes into my office, a guy that has worked with me off and on for 12 years. I know him well. And he says to me, I just got fired. Oh, well, tell me the story. He says, well, I worked at a law firm that did foreclosures, and I renovated, I modified everything, and I don't know, and they fired me. I said, wow. He said, what are you doing? I said, well, I got this half-baked AI idea. And he says, oh, well, this is something that the law firms would definitely want. So now think about this for a minute. A guy walks in that I know, and he's telling me that he's going to bring me a customer. And okay, I said, this is great. I don't believe a word you've said. So you go to the law firm and you say to them, here's what we could do for you. Does it matter? You know, this is the basic rule. Does anybody care? Because technology nerds always, they build something and the assumption is if you build it, they will come. And the answer is they probably don't have your address. So he goes to 2 law firms. One he worked, not the ones that fired him. He goes to 2 competitor law firms. And they both say, this is fabulous. Oh, really? So we decide we'll start a company. I go back to the guy in Bangladesh. I say, hey, can you really do this? He says, oh, yeah. And I got 3 other guys from the university. These guys are all 22, 21, 20-year-old, but brilliant. Okay. And so we start a company called Ask Turing, AskTuring, askturing.ai. And I'm sure all your listeners will know who Alan Turing is. He was the guy that cracked the German code and created the first computer, the Turing computer. I thought the name alone was worth $50,000. So we actually start askturing.ai, and we have our first customers, the law firms. And then, you know, one thing leads to another. Now we have wealth managers, and now we have insurance. And so we have customers. Now, let me explain to your, what you call them, nerd, your audience, because everybody waves their arms about AI. So now I'm going to give a short course because you let me talk. I'm going to do it. So here's the short course on AI. There are a dozen platforms. We're going to call those platforms. Platforms are OpenAI, Gemini, Llama. The list is, that's Mistral. These are the baseline platforms. Each one has spent, you know, $100 billion, and they've trained on 1 trillion words. So they've created the platform that everybody is going to use. And their model is if you ping us, you pay us 1/10 or 100th of a cent every time you ping us. That's their model. 2 kinds of chatbots. One is public facing and one is inward facing. So I had an experience recently, about 6 months, whatever, 8 months ago. I go to buy a car, call up Toyota, and I get a lady named Willow. Willow says, hi, I'm Willow. Do you want to talk to sales or repair? But it's not really Willow, it's a voice. So this is the classic external facing chatbot. Oh, okay, and we had no interest in that. That didn't, I can't compete there, and I didn't think it solved a problem. The problem that we believe exists, and there's multiple articles supporting this, is that the winner of this is going to be somebody who creates the applications within verticals. So in a short case. You're a law firm in this case in the foreclosure business, and your customers are the servicers and Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac and Goldman Sachs, private, not public facing. You have your own documents. So what we believe, the Ask Turing does, is we'll take your internal, copyrighted, you own them documents, we'll train on them, and now you or your employees will be able to access the data. Where is it? What did it say? And particularly in the case of Perplexity, which is one of the platforms, Perplexity uses cites, C-I-T-E, so that when you get an answer from Perplexity, it says, and we got this answer and we'll show you where we got it. So you don't have hallucinations. Okay, so we did the same thing. And what we found was, this is exceedingly valuable. People really wanted this. They will pay us for it. And it's the training on your own material. So you can see, for example, that the New York Times is suing OpenAI because when they trained, they use all of the words that New York Times over the past 5 years or 10 years had printed. So this issue of what you own and what you don't own is really important. So we said, we think that the problem is internal document discovery and sort of what I'll call the knowledge of your internal company. So here's a question. So I go to this fancy blah blah the other day, and there's a 40 or 50 venture capitalists and 120 companies. This is in San Diego. It's called Innovation Week, Innovation Day. So we're looking for customers, and we think one of our customers are venture capital, ironically, venture capitalists. Go to a woman. She runs a $500 million fund in Boston. I say, Betty, let me ask you one question. How many people who are working there today, she says, are 35. How many people working there today were working there 2 years ago? She said 10. I said, interesting. So here's the proposal we've made to venture capitalists, and we have customers. I mean, imagine getting a venture capitalist. I said to them, look, I'll build it for free, or you can invest now. But if you don't invest now and it works, it costs you more to do it after I prove it works. Anyway, here's the venture capital problem, which is so simple to understand that you can extrapolate across multiple industries. I look at 1,000 deals a year, and I've been doing it for 10 years. So I'm going to take your 10,000 deals, that's pitch decks, PDFs, emails, all the crap. And now you say, new deal comes in, electric toaster. You say, this is fucking fantastic. But what they don't know is that 2 years ago, a guy was in the electric toaster business. They looked at it. So you need a body of internal knowledge, and you need it quickly. That's the business we built. It will not be, we won't be the only one who wins. The winner will be people who find verticals that you are adding a specific value to. But I think the chatbot business that you're going to write an email for me, I think that's a sucker bet, and I don't think anybody will pay for it. Huh. That's the company I started, called AskTuring.ai, and I started it because the shrink told me that I should make UnicornHunter.ai, and here's the end of the story. Okay, start the company, and it's a few $100,000 from me and my pals, so we don't really have any dough. But the burn rate when you have a development team in Bangladesh is $1.27. Okay, now you got to go back. If you go back 4, 5, 6 years, I funded 2 companies that were funded by fancy venture capitalists in New York, and they both made money. But I haven't asked for anything. Anyway, we're in New York a week ago, and one thing leads to another. And ironically, the guy says, I'd like to look at your company. And so in other words, for right now, we've got a chance. And the irony of the chance is the funders are exactly the people who would use the product. I mean, insurance company's not going to invest in Turing, but a venture capitalist would. So that's a short course on AI. Do you have any questions?
Yeah, actually, Professor, I got a quick question. I see that the world is definitely becoming like very data driven. And you
right?
as a venture capitalist, and I also believe in something where it's like your vibe attracts your tribe. Hence why I contacted you. When you're talking to people, how much of their vibe plays into you choosing to invest in their product?
Oh boy. So that's a terrific question. I'm going to refer you or your audience to a venture firm in Silicon Valley called NFX. Nathan, Frank, Xavier, NFX. And they write frequently and publicly, they share what they think on how you pick. How do you pick? So everybody wants to be a venture capitalist. You know, you have three friends and your brother-in-law dies and he leaves you a couple $1 million. And so now you have some capital and you think you know how to, you know, you're gonna get 2 and 20 and and the problem is picking. So you asked a question about a vibe. And what they would say is twofold. These sort of table stakes, I'm kind of fascinated by poker. I'll discuss that in a minute.
Hey man,
Table
Nate Silver's
stakes
got a
are,
great book about that right now. So
oh, then you, Boylan, you're my guy, on the edge. Nate Silver. So I have to tell you, already you won my heart. So here's how you win somebody's heart. You reference something that I know is brilliant, and the fact that you're educated enough and know Nate Silver, I'm your guy. So anyway, how you pick. So part of it is it a good idea? And you get to the idea. The vibe is not so much do you like the person, but do you think that they are
nuts.
not crazy? So I have to tell you, I've studied a lot of stuff, and my wife was went to Harvard. But let me just do this. So the Harvard Business School has printed a study. Here's the study. We're going to play a game because you've asked how you pick. So first, it has to be a good enough idea. And then you have to make some decision, sometimes without a lot of time. Is this man or woman or this team maniacs? Okay, here's the Harvard study. They surveyed 100 VCs, and they asked the VCs, of the 100 companies that you have funded over the past 5 or 10 years that failed, what is the reason they failed? And they gave 4 opportunities. It can be market, technology, team, or finance. Okay, so finance, team, market, technology. Those are the 4 things. So it's you'll get the answer right. What percent of the failed companies from the 100 VCs who had funded 100 companies, so out of 10,000 companies, of the ones that failed, what was the percentage allocated to those 4 opportunities? Market, finance, technology, and team. Oh, Vizio is thinking. You can see smoke. Go ahead. Yeah. What's your pick? All right, we'll go Richard. Richard? What do you guys get? A fucking lockjaw? This is a no-brainer.
Teams. What is it?
Finance, market, technology, team. All right, you guys are clearly, dead on arrival. The answer is 82%. 80 was the team. So that means that technology, finance, and market were not, they were less than 25% of why the company failed. Now, sit down. Of the answer, team, what was the overriding reason about the team? And the answer is they couldn't get along. They could not get along. So the co-founders or the team imploded, and that was the majority of the reason. Not only was the biggest reason that the team failed, but within that was what they could not do. It's just astounding. So now you go back to you raise some money and you want to pick somebody. And they usually, of all the companies I've done, maybe 8 or 9, I've always had a partner. Not always been successful, but I've always had at least 2 or, okay. So now you have Betty and Bob come in to see you and you have maybe a 45-minute meeting. And in 45 minutes, you're going to try to find out if they're crazy. Now they're going to tell you, Harry, I'm mentorable, I'm reasonable, I'm charming, I believe in doing good work, I'm honest, there is no fraud, I'm not Sam Bankman-Fried, and you are going to get suckered into this. Well, in that case, I absolutely have to write a check. And I spend a lot of time and have written about how do you probe essentially that they're lying to you. In other words, how is it that people, why is it so hard to find the craziness inherent or just under the surface when you make that bet? That's a really hard question. So you asked a really interesting question, but it isn't just the vibe, which is, I think this team can do it. It's because everybody, look, if for 45 minutes, I can sound totally rational, charming, rational, have a meeting. I promise, I know this, I got the right valuation, I'm prepared to do it. I know how to con you. And if I can do that to any investor, then the investor, how is he going to pick? I mean, in my case, maybe I am a good bet, but when I'm on the other side writing the check, and I'm going to tell you of the failures that I've had, I'd say most, maybe all of them. I haven't been that many failures, but of them, it's been the team. It's been the guy didn't listen. He promised he'd listen. He promised he could be mentored. He promised he would listen. And he was like a rock. He was a block of concrete. I've had a partner who was brilliant technically, brilliant, but he had hallucinations. He saw things. He was nuts. So it's not so easy. The technology might be great. The market might be deep. So the answer is, it's not the vibe. It's a very hard problem. Now, in addition, given current HR, you can't ask certain questions. You can't say, oh, well, tell me about your parents, and I'd like to research your this, and are you transgender? Or, there's a lot of rules. So it's pretty hard to hire. It's harder to hire today than it was. And in fairness, those questions are off limits and probably should be, but it makes it harder for your side, for the investor side. And it'd be nice if you liked the person, but you don't have to be. Remember, if you want a friend, get a dog. The venture capitalist is not your friend. I'm not your friend. I'm an advocate. I'm an ally. I'm supportive. I'm going to try to add value. But if you're a total failure jerk, I'm going to fire you. We're not friends. We're not friends. It's a nice thing to remember. You can have a relationship, but I'm not your friend. I think that's what I think about vibe.
You think people get that confused this day and age in business?
I'll answer it differently. Let's be young and an entrepreneur as opposed to an old guy who can't see very well at the moment. I think the problem of picking a partner is really critical. So normally, Betty and Bob are in business school or computer science, and they go have a cup of coffee and they say, let's start a company. And we got an idea. And the amount of time that they spend really vetting each other is probably less than dinner. And this, at the beginning, it's like any marriage. Yeah, I know, but he leaves his underwear on the floor, but I'm sure I can train him. No, that just comes with the territory. The toilet seat is always left up. I figure I can train him. You say to her, look, I know you can't cook, but I figure eventually, no. The answer is no. You need a certain amount of time to form a relationship. And in this company, the Turing company, all of the team are people I've worked with for 3 or 5 years. So this time around, we got a real chance because very few people leave me. But what I mean by that is I don't leave. I try not to leave messes. But this time around, the team came together in a rather organic way where everybody knew everybody. So there was a certain amount of you didn't have we have a better chance because we know who they are. But when you start the company, the two of you from computer science school, you assume that you'll both be rational. And by the way, what you think is rational and what he or she thinks is rational are not the same. So that's a hard one. And I guess what you'd think about is, so how do you vet your partner? I mean, it's like most people don't get married after 4 weeks and 2 dates. I mean, so it's very difficult. And so let's go back to the Harvard study. 80% of the companies that failed was because the founders couldn't get along. We think we're going to agree. And then, so you got to ask hard questions. I'll give you a perfect example. You'll love this story. So I have this little AI company and a big shot AI company, one in town in San Diego, an AI company comes to pitch me for money because I'm both a founder and a VC. So I write a check. And I think his pre-money is crazy. He's got $1 of revenue. It's a 30 million pre, but it doesn't matter. Finally, the CEO comes to see me and Barbara, my wife, and they want 100 grand. They're raising a $1 million note, and they'd like you to put in 100. And then about towards the end of the meeting, he says, Neil, this is my life's work. I'm never selling this company. Now, let's just pause for a moment. You just asked me for 100 grand. Now, let me ask you, what, I get my money back when you die? What the fuck? You just told me you'd never sell the company. This is your life's work. How do I get out? So the amount of stupidity that is available from these CEOs it's unlimited. I mean, it's like, that was craziness. Oh my God.
I hear team. Do you think that having a leader can motivate a team past things that they disagree with?
Well, that's an interesting question. Normally, I think the answer is that's nuanced. Let's pretend that you're a general on a battlefield. You don't exactly ask everybody, oh, you think we should go left or right? I can list your opinion. You think on the left, there's the Houthis, and on the right, there's the somebodies. And okay, you can get input, but finally the general makes the decision. On the other hand, if you can't convince your team in a startup kind of technology company that this is the right decision, you really need to think 2 or 3 times. A leader is not a dictator, and I'm a big fan of I wouldn't call it consensus, but listening to your team. I'll give you a story. So 100 years ago, Barbara and I started a company, and this is in 95, 96, and you guys are, you weren't even born. The company was made internet kiosks for airports and hotels. You could get your email in a public place. This was revolutionary at the time. You guys you wouldn't know that, but it was. So we have an order where we're building 20 in Dallas, and we get an order in LaGuardia for 12, and we send a junior genius to LaGuardia to install the kiosks in the airport. He flies home and he says to me, this is a guy who's 21 or 22. He's worked for us for a year. Smart. I try to hire smart people. He says, Neil, you know, the kiosk, it's heavy, it's a this, it's a that. What we ought to do is take the software that we're using and put it in a router. Huh? Like, why are we doing a kiosk when we could maybe do something like have it in a hotel room? Oh. So we pivot, meaning the best idea of this company, which we sold for $80 million, the best idea comes from a guy. This is a junior, but you had to listen. And so we took, and again, you wouldn't know this, but in 97 or 98, you took your laptop to a hotel room and you had to dial in. You had to stick into the phone, and you had, you know, slow internet on a telephone line. And we developed software, had that little jack in the wall, and you plug in, and it was high-speed internet in a hotel room. We ultimately, as I say, sold it ultimately to Cisco. They put it in a router. Every hotel room now has it. And of course, now there's Wi-Fi, and the world evolved. But the best idea, well, it wasn't mine, and it wasn't the co-founder. The co-founder is a technical genius, but the best idea came from a junior nobody, who I immediately gave a massive bonus to, especially when we sold the company. So maybe it's not so much convincing your team, it's listening to the team. I'll turn it around on you.
Listening to the team.
How is there a vibe to humility?
Yeah. So you're a reader of Nate Silver's book, and he has a quote, which I recently put into one of our columns, about self-awareness and humility. Self-awareness and humility. I'll tell you a story. I'm a big fan of those two words, self-awareness and humility. In other words, in English, it says, if I get it wrong, admit it quickly. I'll tell you a quick story. So I go to a restaurant where I'm a regular, and there's a new waitress, and they've given her an iPad, and there's 3 or 4 of us, and it's clear that she got the order. She can't, it's not effective. She's not very good at it. And ultimately, the senior person comes out. And the point of the story being, I mean, they fix it. 2 stories there. One is, don't send somebody out without training. Now, I'm a regular customer, so I'll come back, but the training matters, okay? The second thing is, and you could tell there was some tension in this relationship. What would have diffused it is, you know, look, guys, I'm brand new. I'm not exactly sure how to do this. Would you work with me a little bit? It's an iPad. I'm brand, you know, and as soon as you confess, as soon as you say, it's my fault, or I don't know exactly how to do this, or give me, you know, just work with me, admit that you're wrong, not wrong, admit that you're can't quite do it, diffuses everything. Then everybody on the table wants to work with her. Oh, sure, we don't have to push this, and we can wait. Are you sure you got? Yeah, it's hard to, I don't know that you can teach humility, but I sure think it's a valuable characteristic. I tend to be pretty quick to say I'm sorry. There's a lot to be said for, there's 2 sentences, a lot to be said for I'm sorry, and there's another sentence which is not so easy to do. So if you go back into high school, I should have been punched in the nose frequently, but I was able to avoid being punched in the nose by being funny, by being self-deprecating, by finding a way to make a joke. So my way to diffuse anger from tough guys has been to find something funny, or turn the tables, or self-deprecate. That's been my mom. Not everybody has that. That's not. I'm not recommending that for everyone, but that seems to be. You can't go too far wrong with humility, and Silver talks about that, and it's ironic. I mean, look, the issue of riverians, people who live on the river, and villagers. So Nate Silver wrote a book called On the Edge, and it's essentially about risk, and it's about everything. So, and
Great book.
It is.
Great book.
There, one of the last lines in it, he says, in general, I'll offer this to your audience of nerds and entrepreneurs. In general, Silver, who is he's in the top 300 of global poker ratings index. He's really good. And he ran 538, which is the website that did all the political election predictions.
Polymarket now. It's updated.
Right. And he left. So here's the last part of the book. He says, in general, we don't take enough risk. It's a really interesting question. Remember, he's a master of measuring risk reward, what's called EV, expected value. Every decision an entrepreneur makes should have some connection to expected value. Expected value, the risk reward, what's the likelihood of this particular invention, this bet, this decision, okay. And he says, in general, most of us are villagers. We're somewhat conformist. We live in the village. We don't live on the river. We don't live on the last card, the river card. We're hanging and we're waiting for the river card, what he calls Bayesian prior. Bayesian is a kind of technology for content management. And so taking more risk, I think that's highly valuable. I mean, I'm impressed that he said it. I think guys that listen to your podcast are probably not risk averse. They're probably risk inclined. And then you have to go back to Silver and say, all right, what's the expected value of this decision, of this? You can't push all the chips in every single time because you'll go broke. And then you end up with a really interesting concept called anti-fragile. So there's a writer named Nassim Taleb. And Nassim Taleb wrote the book about the black swan.
Yeah.
He's also written several books about a lot of books, but one of the concepts is to try to build a company or even a life that he calls is anti-fragile. Anti-fragile means not easily broken. So you go back to Silver and he says sizing your bet, which is every decision an entrepreneur makes. How big is the risk reward ratio? And if I'm wrong, do I go bust? Am I broke? Am I out of the game? Have I been wiped out? So constantly measuring, keeping your company so it's alive. I'll give you even a better story. So I go to this fancy innovation thing a couple of days ago, and there's an investor there named Dave Titus. Dave Titus he's probably a 70 now, and he ran a venture firm called Windward Ventures, and he's a wonderful character in San Diego. And he says, I have a strategy for you. I said, oh, what is that? He says, it's just staying alive. Okay. And so if you think about it, this is sort of classic. There are lots of companies that they get to a point and they're kind of stuck. They're cash flow positive, but they're never going to be and they can't really sell it to but it's okay to stay alive. And sure enough, Silver talks about optionality. So COVID shows up, and it happens that company made rubber gloves and ventilators. So in other words, you don't know what you don't know. And so there's a lot to be said for hanging on. I'm not sure. Figure it's okay because things happen. People, you go outside and you turn the corner and you meet your wife. I mean, you just don't know. I like the idea of allowing, I mean, this is all Silver sort of, can you stay there long enough to see the last card? Can you stay alive long enough that, and here's another corollary. I got a friend. It's amazing. I only have two. He's a would-be venture capitalist. He's a small-time, I won't give you his name, small-time nobody. I think he raised about $7 or $8 million. Anyway, early on, he invests in a company. And this is classic. This story matches all. And along the way, he gets to a point after about 6-7 years, and it's on an upward trajectory. And he thinks he can sell it for about $75-80 million, whatever, times ARR, whatever the hell it is. And I say, because coming from, remember, I spent time writing sitcoms and movies in Hollywood, so you know, leave them laughing. You never don't stay too long on the stage. You'll get a bill. So I say to him, because we're good friends, I said, now's the time. You ought to unload it. He says, well, the co-founders, now watch, the co-founders, they want to keep going. They think they can get to 200 million. I said, Harry, take the money and run. No, and there's a little bit of, he lays it off on the co-founders. They don't want to sell, but the truth is he's as greedy as the next guy. He assumes that maybe I can get 120. And of course, the end of the story is it's for sale now. It closes in 2 weeks at about 18. Huh? I mean, and that's a little story personally, but there's 100 stories in the journal, which is the last valuation was $1.7 billion, and they sell it for, $23 million. The best of all was a company, again, you're too young, Pointcast. Pointcast was in the mid-90s, and two kids, a man and a woman, I forget. Anyway, Rupert Murdoch offers them $500 million. It's a true story. You can look it up. Fuck you. We're going for $1 billion. I mean, everybody's going for $1 billion because, what with 500 million, what can you get? A small jet. With $1 billion, you can get a bigger jet. And of course, the end of the story, that is 2 years later, they sell it for $2.5 million. Ooh. So you go back to silver. Not only is it risk, it's the size of your bet. I mean, and it seems in retrospect so obvious. You sit in a room and you say, look, if we wait 3 more years, maybe. Give you another story. I just settled some litigation, big numbers in my favor.
Nice.
There's a moment in the mediation in which the gang say, if we go to court, instead of getting $1, we can get $4. Huh. Well, but there's also a risk. If you go to court, maybe you get a judge who thinks you're. And of course, needless to say, we took the money and run. But there was actually a moment where, you could, if we stick around, and if you stick around, a hurricane shows up and it blows you to pieces. So I'm a big fan of, there's a great line. Forget it. It's not Soros. It's somebody else in New York. I forget. He says, I made all my money by selling too soon. I mean, how can you turn that down? I don't want the last dollar. It'll kill you. So Tommy's either gone off to pee or he's disappeared.
Yeah, I'm not. I believe he's probably looking after his dad, because that's usually what happens. So
yeah,
he's probably
dad's not doing so well.
Yeah, he needs some tending here and there once in a while.
I think it's fine. So talk to you guys.
Yeah.
So now, if he's in Lancaster, are you in Lancaster too?
No, I'm in San Fernando Valley.
Okay, and Jan, where are you?
Currently Menifee, but I'm moving to San Diego on Monday.
Okay, good.
Apologies for stepping out. I think I told you I have a 97-year-old father, so there's some stuff I have to kind of take care of.
So what have you guys started companies or invested in companies or worked in companies? What's prompted this podcast?
Well, for me, it's just I remember just going to Tommy one time and I just wanted to talk and nerd out, kind of like a weekly thing, and that was pretty much the origin of this. Just kind of, nerd vomit every week with all the nerdy news that we hear and see on the articles and things like that. But that was pretty much it. It's just an excuse to talk to a couple of close friends every week.
Do you have a job as you work at as well?
Yeah.
What's your interest? What do you do?
My job? I work at a Medtronic. I we assemble the sensors for diabetes patients.
I know about Medtronic and Dexcom.
Yep. I know, from what I know, is that Dexcom is way better. So at least.
But and don't say that with you said that with not being proud. You should say it with a bit more. You should. And now, Jan, what are you doing in your spare time when you're not nerding out with these two bums?
I'm actually in the military, sir.
What part?
The Navy.
Where? Oh, you're coming to San Diego in the Navy.
Yep.
That's good. How many years have you been?
Just hit 12 in March. So
You're going to finish at 20 and hang on, or are you out of this place?
might as well finish. I'm already at like halfway, so figure might as well.
Now, this is a classic. This is a classic risk reward.
Yeah, exactly.
I got 12 in. I'm not thrilled as long as I don't have to go to Afghanistan or Botswana. Yeah, I can hang on. It's pretty good, right?
Yeah.
That was a decision point at about 6 years. You had to make a decision. But at 6 or 7, you got to, because once you're past, you're in, right?
Pretty much. Yeah.
Unless they throw you out, but they won't do that.
Yeah.
And so, Tommy, what is your interest beside running this podcast thing?
I don't know about running it. It's a shared collective, I guess. I other than nerding out and having good people to talk to, it gives me an excuse to satiate my curiosities with people like you. So if I didn't have a podcast, be like, hey, do you want to talk about something? People just brush you off. But when they go, you have a podcast, I can talk to you about some stuff. I'm like, yeah, we can use that as an excuse.
It's interesting. Yeah. Well, look, I think you guys are charming. I appreciate the time.
Ditto. Thanks for coming on, man.
Yeah.
I don't know exactly who's gonna. I did though. You're on the internet. That you have podcasts that can be listened to.
Yes.
Are
you still doing yours? What happened? I feel like you kind of.
It's too much work. And yeah, that's interesting. So.
Because you and your wife have a pretty good banter going on, man.
We did, and we do have to manage your time. You know what's interesting? So here's a test. So we talked for 45 minutes. It was kind of fun. And I'll be interested to see if anyone contacts you about this session or me. And the subtext of that is, we'll do the consultant thing. It's hard to get people to listen. And now let's go back to the leader question you asked. If I'm good at listening, then I'm going to be better at convincing. So one of the techniques in therapy, this is talk therapy. Essentially, the analyst sits there, and after 30 or 40 years, you've given him the answer. You had the answer all along, and all you do is provide a mirror. So I work at asking somewhat open-ended questions and listening. And the client or the partner, he or she's gonna give you the answer if you listen. If you listen and ask good questions, you'll get the answer. And that leads to, I'll end with this, which is how to get the best out of AI is crafting the right question, how you ask the question. And Kevin Roos, who writes for the New York Times, has done lots of articles, but you can ask the same, you can ask the platform the same essential question, changing half a dozen words, moving it 30 degrees left or right, and you'll get a completely different answer. So framing how you ask the question is a skill that'll improve the output of what you get. So
can I meet you halfway and say that I feel that a philosophical ideology of that too is to stay genuinely curious, which a lot of people don't do anymore.
So the key word from your buddy Tommy was genuinely, not curious. Curious is interesting, but if you really listen, if you're genuinely, actually, at the end of the day, I really like people. So I mean, I used to do this, not as a kind of like a card trick. I could be in an elevator. I got maybe 12 floors standing I can have their life story by the time I get to the bottom floor. if you ask it well and listen, I'll get there. I get it all in 12 floors. It's really, mostly people like to talk. Look, you said, Neil, would you like to? Sure, just it's like a spigot. Turn it on. A guy, sure. Is anybody listening? No, I have no listeners. This is a 3-person podcast, but sure, you got nothing better to do on Saturday afternoon. Knock yourself out. So you'll learn a lot. Tommy, send me an email. Keep me posted. Send me a link after you've edited it or whatever you do.
Yeah.
I've enjoyed this. I admire that you reached out.
Yeah. Thanks, dude. Thanks for taking the time. Like
No,
that.
this was good. I was a little bit,
Thank
you got a little bit sideways with me because I kept saying 1 o'clock Saturday, 1 o'clock Saturday. I got to 1 o'clock Saturday. I'll send the link. There is no link. I said, that guy's full of shit. But it turns out that you weren't. And I'm not, you never want to be, arrogant. Let's go back to Nate Silver with self-awareness and humility. Oh, and one more sentence for you. Try to stand in the other person's shoes.
Yeah.
It's hard to know. So, for example, Tommy leaves. I assume he's not. Oh, I have an older father I need to take care of. So you don't know that. You have to allow for the possibility that somebody else's shoes are not as obvious as you think they are. All right, gentlemen, you're loved, and good luck. This was great. Send me whatever it is, and I wish you all well. And Jan, when you get to San Diego, my email's easy. I probably could buy you a cup of coffee.
Oh, appreciate it, sir.
We'll all do that, man.
Thank you
My
so
pleasure.
much.
Thanks, Tommy.
Yeah, man.